Welcome back, everyone, to Birching the West. I'm your host, Eldon Stahl, with the show that covers all things about being a bircher, an educational activist for freedom in the Western United States. And today we have a very special guest with us, two of them actually, Ken and Carolyn Bauer. And they have a little bit of a story about kind of overcoming misconceptions about the JBS, the John Birch Society. So, welcome both to Ken and Carolyn, and so glad we could have you on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on. Uh, well, I'd heard about the John Birch Society back, oh, in the early 60s. Didn't want anything to do with it because I knew it was a communist organization and didn't want anything to do with the communists. So I pretty well stayed clear of it. And that was up until, when did I start hanging out with Dan? That would be
1980s or 90s.
the end of the 80s or 90s. So it was, about 20 or 30 years later that I started hanging out with this friend I knew, and he ended up getting me to join his political party, the Independent American Party, which is it's Nevada's affiliate of the Constitution Party nationally. Back then, it was the U.S. Taxpayers Party that was founded by Howard Phillips, which he worked in the Nixon administration for quite a while until he got tired of all the crap that was going on in Washington, and decided he wanted to get away from them and form a party that was more in line with his politics and stuff. And so we got talking quite a bit, and he gave me a magazine, and this magazine right here. I don't know if any of you have seen this one. This conspiracy issue of the New American. This isn't it. I ordered a box of these, but that one I wore out. I read that and read that and read that, and he says there's a card in there where you can subscribe to that magazine, which I did,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I must have been reading these things for I don't know, maybe a little better than a year, I guess. And
Yeah.
he says we're having a Birch meeting, and I says Birch meeting, what's that? And he said the John Birch Society. And I said, oh, I wouldn't have anything to do with that thing. Why not? And I says, well, they're a communist organization. And what are you going to it for? And he says, well, I haven't found it that way. And I says, well, you better do your research. I says, because he says, well, where'd you find that out? And he says, man, everybody knows it. I've known that since the early 60s. And,
Yeah, everybody knows that.
yeah, and it's just, it's and so he says, huh? He says, what do you think about that magazine there? And he's talking about this conspiracy issue. And I said, man, this is a great magazine here. In fact, I subscribed to it, and I've got quite a few of their other magazines. And he says, who publishes that? And I says, I guess it's New American. I don't know. And so I started looking through it. Man, my eyes about fell out of my head when I seen it was published by the John Birch Society. Whoa, what's going on here? And he says, it's probably just more of your communist doctrine, on the. I says, man, I can't believe this. I says, they really published this? And he says, yeah. And he said, you want an application to sign up? It'll be about $50. I says, yeah, I can do that. So I went ahead and signed up, and I was just blown away that everything I've known for, like I say, 20 or 30 years about the John Birch Society just kind of evaporated, and then we started having some meetings, and then I started going to some of those, and they'd have some like barbecues and stuff to start doing fundraisers and get people to kind of join them and stuff. And went to some of those, and then went to some of the Independent American Party meetings, and run into a guy of all people. I've got a picture of him here.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, but this first one here is me. Then there's my wife Carolyn. Then there's Sheriff Richard Mack. And then there's Thomas Jefferson. That's the friend I knew. And then this end guy here is Randy Weaver from Ruby Ridge. And so that was at a gun show in Elko that our political party put on. And we was having a political convention, and we put on a gun show at the same time. But I come to find out that Tom Jefferson was a member of this, and he'd been a member since the 60s. And he says, I had to join a little bit different than you. He says, back when I joined, there was so much opposition to the John Birch Society, they had to kind of, you could get in, you couldn't just hear about it and join it. Your friends had to take you into it, and they had to kind of admit you into the John Birch Society to make sure you're solid and that you're a good constitutionalist and everything. And he said the first meeting I went to was in McGill. This guy was born in Milford here, but he moved out to Ely in the early 50s. And I met him after I moved out there. And he says that when I first went there, he says, we went to this place in McGill. And he says, this guy was telling me about this meetings that they were having, and I was very interested, and he knew I would be, because he knew my political persuasions. So he says, let's go to this meeting. I says, okay. And he says, you can join this thing, and it'll help you be more patriotic, and they do things that help to put our government back onto a solid footing. And I'm thinking, a solid footing back in the 60s? I thought it was solid back in the 60s, but that's how close, blind I was back then in the 60s. But he said they pulled up to the place, and Tom says, don't look like they're home. And he said, let me go check. And he said, I can tell you they're not home. There's no lights on. So he went and he knocked on the door, and there was a guy answered the door, and he said he just barely cracked the door open. He didn't see anybody. And he says he's got a friend there, and can he come in? They says, yes. So he goes back to the car and gets Tom, and then he come in. And when they got in the house, and they turned some of the lights on and stuff, and then they had their meeting, and he joined. And he says that's the way it was for the first few years to get the Birch Society going. There's so much opposition to it.
Wow, that sounds like, oh, sorry to interrupt. That sounds like some pretty heavy opposition, that people were just so concerned that, well, would you say it was the media that was mainly driving this suspicion of the John Birch Society and all these kind of misconceptions?
Boy, I don't know what it was back then. I think the media had a lot to do with it, and it's and I found out through him and through this Dan Hansen that got me to join that this being a communist organization was put out, that false narrative was put out by none other than the communists. They when they wanted to smear people, they always smeared with their own brush, with their own paint, so to speak. And it was pretty effective. It was effective on me for 20 or 30 years, before I realized what was going on here. And they only wanted good people into it to begin with. Now it's kind of loose. They'll let, if anybody wants to join, they'll let them join, and then they kind of try and re-educate them if they're not educated enough. And which I think is a better way to go. But when they first start, but think of that, when they had, with that much fear of letting people know you was a member of the John Birch Society, look at the background checks they done on Robert Welch, the communist done on Robert Welch. I mean, this was saying 60. That the Birch Society was a year old. To have that much opposition in a year, they must have known this was a deadly organization to them, and they had to nip it in the bud while they could, which they never did. But it's still pretty small, but it's pretty effective, you know. And it was quite a surprise to me when I found this out, and I thought, oh, that's one way you can tell if you're doing a good job. If there's really opposition to you, you must be on the right side. So
Yeah, it's like that saying, if you're over the target, you're going to get flack, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then of course, when Carolyn and I got married, I mean, it was her other husband had joined years earlier, so she was a lot more open to it than I was. But I was quite surprised to find out that I'd had friends from when I was real young, in my teens and in my early 20s, that were already birchers and that knew about it, and I was the one that thought I knew all about it, you know. But
Yeah,
maybe
that is a neat story. So I guess you got some information that maybe wasn't quite accurate, and then you read the conspiracy issue. Some of our members are probably newer; they don't remember. I remember that when I was I guess finishing high school at the time. I remember when that came out and moving those in boxes and things. My parents were members, of course, as well. That was quite a thing, that conspiracy issue. I guess the updated one is probably what, the Deep State book, or the two issues on the Deep State from the New American.
Yeah, I don't know what there are now. I mean, we bought a box of these. Oh, I don't know when it was.
Were we married yet?
Yeah, we were living here, so it was after 05. We called them and seen if they had some more, and they said yes, they did. So we bought a box of 100 of them, you know, and started passing them out. We still got about maybe 20 of them left now, and I sent one to a friend in PA, and he read the thing, and he got excited about it and says, you know what, I loaned it out, you know. So I sent him another one, and so he told that friend, he said, you can keep that one. When you're done with it, read it again. And when you're done with it, reading it again, pass it around to somebody else so we can get this going, see if we can't get more members. And he's a little bit too broke to join, but he's back in PA. He's trying to pass this around to as many people as he can. He said that was he knew a lot about the conspiracies and stuff like that. He said, but this magazine was just a complete eye opener to him, you know. And he'd been in his movement, he thought, for a few years.
Yeah.
And then I sent him Cleon Skousen's A 5,000-Year Lead. And
oh, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, he really thinks a lot of Skousen in his book. He says this guy was just absolutely brilliant. You know.
You don't have that on hand to show to the viewers, do you?
It's in the other room. I can go get it.
Well, it's.
I can talk while I
Yeah,
fix it.
Okay.
Carolyn.
Okay, yeah, Carolyn, you give you some time to. It's nice to show people the book, you know, if you mention something, if you have it. But
right.
yeah.
Well, my oldest is going on 45 in June, and she was about 2 years old when a John Birch coordinator came to our house and showed us a film strip, and we joined on the spot. I think the first book that I read was Nundale Call It Conspiracy. So that was a long time ago, maybe 77, 78. So I've been aware of what's been going on generally for all this time. So that's my story in a nutshell. And then when Ken and I were dating, we had the same religion, we had the same politics, we had the same idea on money, so, and other things. So it was like a no-brainer. So here we are, 20 years later.
Yeah. Well, I talk with a lot of people that they read the Nundale Call It Conspiracy book by Gary Allen. Apparently millions of those sold at the time. It was a little book, pretty brief overview, but
I'll have one of those too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go get it.
okay.
Yeah, you know, that's
Did you
that's
find the
been,
book?
yes, I have. It's
Oh, okay, there we go.
right here.
Yeah, it looks good.
Uh, uh, that book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. That's been the only non-church book that was ever mentioned, uh, requested that the members read at a general conference, and that was by Ezra Taft Benson. You know,
Mm-hmm.
another thing too, I forgot to mention is this Dan Hansen. I don't happen to have a picture of him, but he uh, he showed me a video. It's a VHS tape, and you sent me to one on YouTube, but that's not the one I was looking for.
Okay.
This one, he was talking about promoting the John Birch Society, and he says that he was a good friend of the founder, Robert Welch, and he was going to join it, but the church told him not to join the John Birch Society because it was too controversial. And with him being an apostle, they told him not to join it, so he didn't. He says, however, they never told me that my family couldn't join it, and every one of my family members is a Birch member. So, and he recommended that all other members that the church haven't told to stay away from the Birch Society to join it. And but when he died, his one of his sons come in, and they just didn't like the Birch Society, so they took that video and got rid of it. And I told him I'd like to have it. I said, if you're going to throw it away, just give it to me. And he said, there was no such video. Well, I know that wasn't true because I'd seen it, you know.
Right.
And
I don't know where the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy is, but here's a picture of Dan Hansen.
here's a picture of Dan Hansen that this is the guy that got me into the Birch Society. I can go get that.
Uh-huh.
You know where it is? Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I was Dan Hansen's secretary for several years in a very unique situation. I helped him answer phones and write up proofing contract estimates. And when he hired someone else to join the staff, he sent me to his sister's office to help her with Nevada Eagle Forum.
Okay.
I was on his payroll the whole time.
Huh.
And
Got it.
so,
You got a lot of experience there.
yeah, I was with Eagle Forum and the Independent American Party. In fact, Ken and I helped gather signatures to put the Independent American Party on the Nevada ballot.
Okay.
Here's this
Yeah.
here's this
Oh, there's
book
the
here.
book.
Yes. It's got his price tag on there. Can you see it?
Looks like a whole $1.
$1, yes. Yep, and this was, you know, I'd had this book for years, probably for about 25, 30 years, and we just had a friend that says that she heard about that and got a copy of it off Amazon. It was a used one, and just read that the other day. We're always teasing each other about reading books, you know, and how, you know, did you read this book? No, I'm going to read that one. No, and then we keep teasing each other. How come you ain't read it? How come you? So without her saying anything, I said it was a good book. I pretended I didn't know, you know, and she said, yeah, it was. It's really good and everything. It's real interesting. Yeah, I ought to get it to you and let you read it. And I said, okay, I might have a copy. Let me look and see. The next time I seen her, I thought I read that book, you know, so she couldn't. But I'd had it so many years and finally read this. But it's most of this stuff is pretty common knowledge right now, you know, and especially if you've been in the Birch Society for any length of time, you know, most of the stuff is common knowledge. But back then, when this was, I don't know when this was even published.
1970, I believe.
71, yeah.
71.
70, yeah, 71. Yeah, and then its first printing was 72, 350,000 copies. Second printing is in March of 70. That was February 72. March of 72, they did 1,250,000 copies. And third printing was April of 72, 4 million copies.
Oh, wow.
And ours is
So-
old enough that the pages are yellow.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah. Well, yeah, the John Birch Society really blazed the trails, pioneered things for exposing what we call the deep state. First one was Invisible Government by Dan Smoot from 1962. But yeah, that
I was still
Under-
in high school then.
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What
it's
year was that?
1962.
Oh, yeah, I was still in high school too.
Yeah. So that was really the first book that the JBS did about what we call the insiders, sometimes the deep state. But we've done a lot of books about that, you know, the establishment, the people that are pushing for a new world order, conspiring to undermine our freedoms, different aspects of it. But yeah, that none dare call it conspiracy. That's amazing how many they moved, how many copies, and so many people became alert because of it.
With the information that our friend bought it off of Amazon, I'm thinking maybe we should put in our trust, all the political books go to Amazon so people can buy them.
Good. Yeah.
One thing here in this conspiracy issue, I'm looking for it and I can't find it for some reason. Oh, there it is. It's one of the guys who was part of all of this was
Oh.
good old Rush Limbaugh. You know, that guy, I used to listen to him, think he was great and everything, think he was just right on the money. But what really turned me against this guy, and then I started listening to him a little closer, was when he said that the only way to save this country is to vote in John McCain. And he said there's no such thing as a Council of Foreign Relations. He says, so if you speak about CFR on this program, it better stand for campaign finance reform.
So basically, like this article from the magazine, it was saying that Rush Limbaugh just didn't want to talk about conspiracy at all on his show. Is that right? Or this can't?
Yeah. Well, what I noticed about him after that is you know, I was shocked to see his picture in an article there on in the magazine. It's been quite a while since I read it, so I can't remember what it was, but I started noticing him and I thought, this guy's extremely brilliant, and people I don't think realize how brilliant he is. This is one guy that can take you almost to the truth and then keep talking and veer you off. And when he leaves you, you're so far away from the truth, you don't even realize he's taking you away, you know, and that's where he leaves you. And I thought, man, this guy is sharp. And but yeah, he would not talk about the conspiracies or anything. He wouldn't talk about any of that stuff on there. And it just and I got that's when I got to thinking, well, you know, and he was so big, you know, he was the biggest, well, the biggest talk show host in the world next to Art Bell. Art Bell now was one that was worldwide where Rush wasn't, you know, and he had listeners all over the world that Art Bell did. And I really liked Art Bell. And he'd put on a lot of controversial stuff. And I really liked him. But I got to thinking, can we really believe these talk show hosts? You know, they're always talking about all this stuff, and then I noticed the one thing that I noticed about all of them, it's a common thread that runs through almost every one of them. In fact, I could say 99.99% of them. They all tell you all the bad stuff that's wrong with this country, but not one of them comes up with a solution.
Mm.
Nobody comes up with
Yeah.
a solution. That's one thing I can say that really sets the Birch Society apart, because they do come up with solutions on stuff. Like the last two issues of the bulletin have come up with solutions on what to do about all this voter fraud and stuff. We can't do nothing about what's happened, but they're telling us ideas and stuff, what we could do to move forward to eliminate it, so that we can get back to fair elections again. And in the last New American, they had that one on, I can't remember his name, Hammer, that guy that brought down Bonnie and Clyde. And he was the one that uncovered a voter fraud with Lyndon Baines Johnson when he got in the first time as U.S. Senator in Texas, and how he'd stuffed the ballot boxes. They took it and got it in front of the judges and stuff in court, and they done nothing about it. They just let him be seated. And what a travesty that guy was, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows us that voter fraud is not something that's new.
No, and if you ever read the book The Real Lincoln, you'll find out it's very old. Lincoln engaged in it also. Yeah, he I don't know. Do you know what diesel therapy is?
No.
Diesel therapy is where like somebody from the government will pick you up, they'll put you in a van, and they'll take you all over the country, you know, and then they don't let you out of the van only to use the bathroom, and they feed you in the van, they do all this stuff, and they take you all over, and you don't know where you're at. When they finally let you go, if they let you go, they let you go in some, like if they pick you up in Washington, like they did with one woman, they dropped her off in Florida. She had the clothes on her back, she had no ID, she had no money, she had nothing. They took her out. Well, she had a heck of a time getting in touch with her family so they could wire her some money so she could get back. And Lincoln done the same thing with one of his political opponents that he was running against for president, and he took him down south, and the South didn't want him, so he had these people take him up and drop him off up in Canada, and they took everything from him, and he had a heck of a time getting a job and scraping some money together. By the time he got back to the United States, the election was over, and of course Lincoln had won because they didn't know where his opponent had gone, you know. And then
I hadn't heard that story. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then he'd had some of his people that were against him, like in the Senate and stuff, the Senate and the House, and the press. He'd have them jailed if he didn't like what they were saying about him, or you know, some of their policies and stuff. So this stuff, it seems to be new to us, but it's been business as usual in Washington since well, at least the 1860s, and maybe even before. You know, it's once they're in power, they get to write the history. So it's they can kind of keep hidden what they want to be hidden. You know, it's just
right.
It's like Gary Kasparov said about he was being interviewed one time, and they said how popular George Bush was more popular than Putin. And he says, how do you know that? He says, you got a free press here. He says, but Putin, he owns the press in Russia. He says, of course he's got a better approval rating than Bush would have. You don't know. He said, if you had an honest press here, Bush might not be as popular as Putin, you know, which makes a lot of sense. And Gary Kasparov, probably you don't know, but he was world chess champion for over 20 years. He was from the Soviet Union, from Baku, Azerbaijan is where he was from. But he ran against Putin and ended up in jail over there. And when he got out, he moved to New York and has never gone back since. You know.
Right. Oh wow. Well, that's quite a story. It's good to know. You know what? Sometimes there's things that I guess change how we see the world, and sometimes we get a little, I guess, a checkup on what's reality and what's maybe myth, so to speak, right? It's
Yeah.
good to, yeah.
I really believed in a lot of those myths about the John Birch Society too for years. I'm I'm a little bit slower to do that now on stuff because that was really a wake up call for me that maybe things aren't as they appear. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and not in just in this country, but in the world.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. Well, we a little past half hour. Should we open it up for questions, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to do that?
I'm
Okay.
not-
Let's see if anybody has some questions. You gotta unmute yourself, ask a question, mute yourself, all that.
This is Lee Phipps talking. Back when I was in high school in Hurricane, Utah, I think it was my junior year, and I think it was in 1972 that they had a competition on writing an essay about the Nunn-Derrick Connell conspiracy, but I had no idea anything about the book itself prior to that. And it was interesting to become aware of that there were some other people, perhaps in the John Birch Society, that had connections to the public school there to use that book as a essay challenge to read the book and make an essay about what you had read. And anyway, that was my first acquaintance with that book. And
Good book, huh?
yeah, it was a good book. And me and a friend of mine were in high school, and Tokerville had a chapter, and I think Hurricane probably had a chapter too, and we were invited to come and listen. And so that was my first exposure to the JBS.
Oh,
But
good deal.
it's interesting how conspiracy, how much challenges that people who are on the right side of truth, how much they got the runt end of the deal sometimes back in the early days.
Yeah, to attempt to smear.
Yeah,
Kind of
You know,
reminds me of what some of these other groups like the Tea Parties went through, and Trump to a certain level. They tried to attack them and smear them with all kinds of bad names.
one more a little story about this friend of ours that introduced me to this was Dan. He was always writing letters to the editor. And over in Reno, they got the Reno Gazette Journal over there. That's their main paper. They come out with what they call the Silver Pen Award. And and what they do is they take all these letters to the editor, and they decide each month who's wrote the best letter to the editor.
Oh,
And then what they do is they bring them in, they take a picture of them, and they put that they won the Silver Pen Award. And so they hated this guy, this Dan Hansen. They hated his guts. Anytime he wrote a letter in there, they'd really edit it down, or else they wouldn't print it. And they'd write him a letter and tell him it's stupid. They'd never print anything like that or anything. Well, he had a pen name named Ian McGavin. And he used to write in, he'd write something on Dan Hansen, he'd write one in on Ian McGavin. And they'd accept the one on Ian McGavin, but the one on Dan Hansen, they'd send it back and they'd tell him it's stupid. They'd never print it. And so don't write to our paper anymore. Well, they called him one time and they says, we'd like you to come down to the paper. And he says, what for? They asked for Ian McGavin. So he answered the phone. And And they said, we'd like you to come down to the paper. And he says, what for? And they says, well, you've won the Silver Pen Award. Can you do that? And he said, well, I can't do it today. It'd have to take me a couple of days before I could get so I could come down there. And they said, that'd be fine. And so they set up a date a couple of days later. He could have gone down that day, but he couldn't do it then because, let me show you this picture here. These two pictures here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Okay. That was his disguise.
Oh, gee. Yeah.
And he kind of talked to his
This-
nose. And so he goes down there and the girl
No.
says, what are you here for? And he said, the award. He says, the award, what award? And he said, that Silver Pen Award. They call me to come down. And he's dressed in these real shabby clothes. He's kind of in his suit pants and stuff
Oh,
there.
boy.
But he had this dirty old coat on and these big overgrown shoes and stuff. And he looked like it was somebody that had just come out from under the bridge, you know. And he went there, and he had Billy Bob teeth
Oh,
in,
man.
and
Yeah.
so so the woman, she was kind of in shock. She says, let me go get the editor. So she went and got the editor
Oh, no.
and says, Ian McGavin's out here. So the guy comes out and he's looking around. He says, where is he? And she points to this dirty old guy over there and says, he's right there. And he said he'd done his best to keep from laughing. He says, but the shock on that guy's face when he seen him. And so he says, well, he had to talk him into putting his picture in the paper because they didn't want his pic. They just wanted an article with no picture. But they went in and put the picture in and everything. And when this guy died, they put a real bad article in there about him and everything. And to this day, of course, if they happen to see this on YouTube, they might catch on to it. But to this day, and he died back in January 22nd of 2002. To this day, they don't have any idea that Ian McGavin and Daniel Hansen were the same person. And it was funny that they
Oh, man.
They did not reveal it at the funeral.
no, it was great that the way you've done that. And everybody used to put that paper about that, and it was just it was a great guy, and I'm sure been blessed to have him in my life and to have known him, because that's the reason that I am a bircher today, you know.
Yeah, I've never tried that, to do undercover or whatever you might call it, writing into the letters to the editor. That's a unique thing, but I suppose to try to get them to printed stuff, you never know. Could work.
Well, I've decided that, you know, of course, our little paper here, we don't, I don't write many letters into it. It's just a little weekly paper, but I thought if I'd still lived in Reno Sparks area, that I'd come up with a pen name of Drew Phillip. You ever heard of that name?
No?
Switch it around.
Oh, okay. Okay. I got it.
Yeah. So, I didn't think they'd catch on to it either. So I thought that'd be a pretty good pen name to put it.
Yeah.
Drew Phillip. So,
Drew Phillip.
yeah.
I like that. Wow.
So,
Well, that's some good stories. I just that was a good funny one. It's nice to have some things, you know, you look back in life and you sometimes you think, wow, this is just, you know, some funny story that I should share with somebody else and help them, you know, see life's twists and turns, and sometimes how you find out things are not what they appear necessarily. So it's good to talk about getting over those misunderstandings, as we like to call them, right?
well, and
Yeah.
you know what got me is this guy was it seemed like if there was a battle, he was in the middle of it, you know.
Mm.
And and I've known so many people that I'm just sick of this. I'd like to kill this guy, I'd like to kill that guy, and this guy never got like that. He was always in the fight, but he always had a good attitude, and he was always like this Ian McGavin stuff. He was always able to think on his feet. How am I going to keep them from knowing who I am? Because once he went down there, they knew who he was. Once he went down there and looked like him, they'd never print another one of his letters. And so, so he's able to think on his feet, but still maintain his sense of humor. And I've always admired that about him, you know.
And he was courageous. He went to the Sparks City Council to oppose the name of a street to be changed. And the original name was Audie Boulevard. And Senator Audie was an amazing political person. He was a statesman, not just political. And they wanted to change it to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Dan Hansen went down and said, no, Martin Luther King hasn't done anything for Sparks. He hasn't done anything for Nevada. Name a new street out in Northeast Sparks and name one of those after him, but not Audie Boulevard. Well, he went over his time. He refused to stop talking. He was arrested, basically. Went to court. The judge said that he was guilty, and his fine was his, whatever you call it, his.
He had, the judge was a friend of his and says, I'm going to have to fine you to 100 hours of community service. And he says, okay. And he says, now your community service, I'm going to set what it has to be. It can't be just anything you want. You're going to have to go into Sparks High, and you're going to have to teach these kids about the Constitution of the United States. And he says, I object to that. And the judge says, what are you talking about? And he says, it's only 100 hours. He wanted more, but he did go in there and teach that. But it was funny. He was the only one that objected to it out of the whole town, you know.
Right.
And Reno and Sparks combined, it's about 230,000 people. He was the only one that objected to it. And they said they wasn't going to do it. But he got in there with a history of Audie, of how he was a state senator. I think he was even a U.S. senator at one time for a while.
He had quite a history.
But he laid out his whole history, when he was born, what he'd done, where he went to school, everything. He'd done his research and went in there. Well, when it was all we're done with, today, that street is named Audie Boulevard still. The one out there in Northeast Sparks, where they had that new subdivision where he told him to put that that's Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So a lot of people think, well, you know, I can't do anything. This guy believed there was nothing he couldn't do. I mean, he was the only person that objected. And the whole city council, which I think was about 6 or 7 councilmen, you know, and the mayor and stuff, they all went along with it. He did get arrested, you know, and he did make the paper again, you know, and the paper kind of embellished on what happened there, but he got his way. He got his way, and that street is still Audie Boulevard there in Sparks instead of changing the name of it, you know, and he
wow. One person can make a difference. And
one person can make a difference, yeah.
Yeah, it certainly shows. It's good to keep a good sense of humor. I know Jonathan McManus, the president of the John Birch Society, well, emeritus status now, he would say if you're birching and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I think we're going to start building up down here in Cedar City. I was really encouraged about those other people coming, and we've also joined their group, and haven't been making all their meetings, but they've kind of agreed to keep the first Thursday open, and try and get their members to come to the Birch and see if we can't get them to join this one, and see if we can't get a little bit stronger voice down here.
Well, the camaraderie is developing.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
That's good. Yeah, that makes a difference, right? Makes it more fun when you're able to have some friends and enjoy your time together.
Yeah, well, and
very much.
we can get them to reading these bulletins every month, and we can go there and discuss the bulletins. And there's a lot of, we got 30 or 40 people that's all read the bulletin, and they come there with 30 or 40 different views on what they just seen out of that. You can come up with a real good solution as to how to attack it for our local area. So
That's right.
it's
That's right. Well, any other questions for Ken and Karen?
Ken and Carolyn was wondering if you had a phone number or an address that if I contact anybody I know in your area that would be interested in participating.
Yeah. Are you ready to write?
Yes.
My phone number is 435-817-1404.
Okay.
And that's Kenneth, Kenneth, and that's Bauer.
BAE.
No, Bauer.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, it's a good idea if you know anybody that down in this end, around the Cedar City area that you'd be interested in it. Why, we appreciate knowing about them.
Yeah.
I did leave one thing out. When I was in my early years in Reno, Nevada, the John Birch Society chapter leader would have us over to her house. And after a discussion of the current news and topic, she would hand out paper and a pen and have us write a short letter to a representative. And she said that she would be mailing them the next day. So having something to write about and a person to write it to, I think made a difference.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of the theme of doing like an information and action meeting or dinner, certainly. Right? Take action and
Yeah.
have some fun, get some information, education.
So we need to try to strive to do that here.
Yeah, it's back in the day, I guess they used to do postcards, but nowadays we can do with email and phone calls and postcards too,
Right.
and letters, right?
This is pre-email day.
Yeah, a few years back, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And boy, that sure works too. It's just, we when we was in Reno, we went to Carson City one time to lobby on, I don't know, a couple of bills that had come up, and we talked to one of the was it an assemblywoman or is she a senator that told us, it was one of them anyway, and she said this is really effective with you people showing up, because do you know how these numbers work? And we says no, and she says, we figure every person that makes a phone call, we multiply that by 10, because it's pretty easy to pick up the phone and call us. If somebody goes to and sends us an email, we multiply that by about 20. And because everybody's got a computer at their house, and they can just go. That was before it was come out on the cell phones and stuff. And we figured that it doesn't take too much time or effort to do that. And if they sit down and write us a letter, we multiply that by about 500. Because that takes a lot more time. You have to take the money for the stamp and stuff. And so for everyone that writes a letter in there, they multiply that by 500, because there's another 500 people that feel just like they do, but didn't want to take time to write the letter and put the stamp on it and in the envelope and stuff. And if you actually show up, you know, at the meeting, at the hearing, they multiply that by 1,000. Because they figure there's 1,000 people out there that feel the same way, that couldn't get off work or whatever the circumstance was, they couldn't travel or whatever. But so it's very effective, even writing letters and stuff, especially if you do a handwritten letter, that the multiplication of that goes way, way up, which I never realized. But she says that's how they multiply it out to figure out, you know, like licking their finger and hold it in the wind, you know, and that's kind of what they do on that. And it kind of gives them a little bit of a thermometer on what the temperature is of the public out there. So
Certainly.
So they do respond to pressure. They really do, you know.
Yeah, very responsive by nature. They have to be, of course, I suppose, because for U.S. House, every 2 years they're elected. They have to face another election and ask for the voters to send them back, right?
Well, I'm wondering if I think this last two bulletins are very crucial on that, because if we don't get this voter fraud straightened out, it won't make any difference. It'll be just like Lennon said. It don't matter who votes, it only matters who counts the votes.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, underscores the importance of that campaign for sure. So
right. Or what electronic machine is tabulating the votes, you know. And I'd like to see him get rid of all of that stuff. Just go back to the paper ballots and stuff, and
yeah,
go vote in person, except for military and some people that are in a rest home or something like that. Allow them to vote by mail. You know, that
yeah, that's right.
it's this just everybody getting a mail-in ballot is just opens it up to so much fraud. It's unbelievable. We just may as well not even vote. That's why I like to shock people on this when I try and get them to involved in this to start putting pressure on our legislators to change some of these voting laws. I tell them, do you hear that Romney's getting back in? And when they said, I don't think he can be voted back in, I said, it doesn't matter if he's voted back in or not. If that voting machine wants him in, he's in.
That's a good way to get people's attention, huh?
Yeah, and it does. Well, it can't. I said, did you vote for Biden? No, I didn't. I said, is he in? It don't matter who votes, it only matters who counts the votes. So
I brought up the webpage of Restore Election Integrity. Certainly recommend our viewers and listeners as well. If you were just listening, jbs.org/vote. Very simple, jbs.org/vote. And have a action campaign called Restore Election Integrity. You can find out what we recommend, tools you can use, things you can do to, and also education that you could get for yourself and others.
You know,
I like that. Park the motor voter act.
We'd like to be able to print some of these things that are on the website, but we can't get them to print large enough and within an allotted space, an 8.5 by 11 to be readable. So what do we have to do? Copy and paste?
Yeah, you probably need to do copy and paste if it's on the website. It's just the formatting of it. You can put it into a Word file, I suppose, something like that.
Okay.
And yeah, but we also have I think we're going to have a reprint on this from the latest issue of the New American. The cover, let me see if I've got it here. I think it's the same artwork. Bring it up here. Oh, not that one. Right here. Yes. Everybody see that? Maybe I should make it bigger, huh? Here, I'll unshare the screen.
Email me this one if you could.
There we go. Oh, actually, hold it up to the right camera. There we go. Did you get that in the mail?
Yes, we did. I think we do have that one.
Real good article.
Yeah, that'll be easy to copy.
Yeah, I think this will be in probably as a reprint. So real good. And then it goes into.
How do do we learn which ones are going to be reprinted? Or they all are? by-
It, well, just depends
Volume.
on how much demand there is, and then there's a decision at headquarters that, you know, we need more reprints of this because people want it. Sometimes it's just because so many people like the magazine itself, they run out of copies and they say, well, okay, let's reprint this certain article out of the magazine, something like that. But you can always go to thenewamerican.com and
Is
back
it
to
.com or .org?
.com.
.com? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Or you can go to shop TNA, so shop T,
Oh.
the New American
The New American, that's right.
.org. And you can click on reprints and find out all the reprints they have available. They have print reprints. They also have downloads. Some of them are not. Some of them available both formats, some just one format.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's nice to have. Sometimes things are on clearance. You can get a lot of copies for cheap.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
trying
I
to get
didn't
rid
know
of
that
something.
either.
Yep. So good to, yep, know your resources. That's right. All right. Well, we're right up against the hour. Any parting thoughts, Ken and Carolyn? Something to leave our listeners, viewers with?
Never give up.
Yeah, and just keep working on people. That's what they did with me, and it was pretty subtle on how they changed my mind, and I didn't realize how wrong I was. And that's hard. That's real hard for anybody to admit that they've been wrong. You know, it was
Yes.
good for me, real good for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been kind of a conspiracy nut. That's what all my friends have always thought about me for quite a while. But you know, this election and I think the next one and the next one is going to show that we're not as conspiratorial nuts as they think we are. That we've been right on the money for a long time. You know, and it just the Birch Society. They really do their homework before they put it in print. I remember they was wrong on one thing, and that was on Clinton having that black woman have his baby. And all the news media and everybody jumped on that. And then when they done a DNA test, they found out it wasn't. The Birch Society said they'd never do that again. Their news might be a little late, but it's going to be accurate. And it's always been, except for that one time that they're I think probably the most accurate source that we have out there for pushing back on this tyranny that we're facing today. You know, just I don't think they're head and shoulders above everybody else that I've ever seen. So
Yeah, very, very valuable. Well, it's good to have you both on, Ken and Carolyn.
Been fun.
Yes, thank you so much. It has been fun, and hopefully we can, you know, keep pushing forward. As you say, never give up. We've got to keep an open mind on things, and I'll just gotta close it out. Thank you for everyone for watching, for listening to Birching the West today. Make sure if you have a desire to help out with the billboards, of course, I always like to put a plug in for that. My email is eStahl, STAHL, @jbs.org. Let me know if you'd like to help it get up. We're making headway. Thank you to those who have helped out with that. And we want to spread the word, help people know we're out there, help people know that there's somebody with solutions like Ken pointed to. So glad you all could be on Birching the West. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do with this, and spread the word, because we need to make sure we spread the word for freedom. So thank you everyone for being on.